Abigail was fussing in the kitchen. Today she wanted to make pancakes. She stirred the dough gently and hummed a melody. She was in a good mood, for she had 3 weeks of vacation ahead of her. Standing by the stove, Abigail occasionally glanced outside. Her neighbours' children were playing in the playground, and there was Mr. Brown, smoking a cigar on a bench under a sprawling tree. Suddenly, Abigail noticed an elderly neighbour from the 4th floor. Mrs. Sanders slowly wandered down the road with her head down. There was a half-empty bag in her hand with some groceries on the bottom. Abigail shook her head sadly. Mrs. Saunders has given up. She can hardly walk any more, and her clothes are all shabby. She used to be more cheerful. Abigail moved here about 5 years ago. She quickly got used to the place, got to know all the neighbours. She even became friends with one woman. She told her about Mrs. Sanders, who had lived here for a long time. She was already over 80 years old and had no family, no children, no grandchildren, no friends. She had no relations with her neighbours and was so unsociable that she wouldn't let anyone near her. She was not like any ordinary elderly woman. It was always quiet in her apartment. There was never the sound of a television or the sound of a conversation. It was as if nobody lived there. People saw her only when she went out to buy groceries. Abigail was always surprised when she listened to such conversations. She thought that everyone avoided Mrs. Sanders, so she tried to establish contact with her, no matter what. Abigail often greeted her politely, always smiling and asking about her well-being. Mrs. Sanders never responded to her friendliness, never said hello, and answered all her questions with something unintelligible. Her face was so sullen that everyone lost all desire to contact her, but Abigail did not give up. The woman was distracted from her thoughts only when she smelled a burnt pancake. No, I will not leave it like that. It's clear that the elderly woman is not well. Maybe she needs help. Exactly. I know what to do. I'll take her some pancakes, and she'll open the door for me. Abigail knew that the elderly woman never opened the door to anyone, and even if there was a fire in the house, she would still not open it for nothing. Mrs. Sanders was very suspicious, but Abigail decided to try. She put the frying pan aside and hurried to the door to go out into the entryway. The elderly woman was just slowly making her way up to the 2nd floor, clinging to the handrail. "Hello, Mrs. Sanders," said Abigail. The elderly woman didn't say anything and didn't even lift her head. Abigail frowned. She looked bad. Her clothes were dirty and would have been better thrown away than washed at all, patch upon patch. "I would like to treat you with pancakes, Mrs. Sanders," continued Abigail to bend her line. The elderly woman's eyes were inflamed and suspicious, but there was some interest in them. Abigail realized that she had heard her perfectly well. Mrs. Sanders did not answer, but continued to climb up. Abigail shouted after her, "I'll come and see you in half an hour when I've cooked the pancakes. You'll open the door for me." The old woman remained silent for the 3rd time, and Abigail hurried back to her apartment to finish her pancakes. An hour later, she was already standing on the 4th floor at Mrs. Sanders' door. The bell on the door did not work. She knocked 3 times. In response was silence. Abigail knocked a little louder again. No answer. Then Abigail knocked on the door 5 times and said loudly, "Mrs. Sanders, open the door, please. I know you're home." Abigail stood at the door for a minute, but the answer was a dead silence, as if there was no one in the apartment. But Abigail knew for a fact that the elderly woman left the apartment only once a week. If she had already come home, she wouldn't come out until next week. And she might not have heard her knocking, only if she was sitting there now wearing headphones and listening to music. Abigail grinned, pushing the nonsensical image away from her and knocking loudly again. "Mrs. Sanders, it's Abigail, the neighbour from the second floor. I brought you pancakes. Remember, I promised you today. Open up, please. I'll just give you a plate." After a minute, Abigail sighed heavily, admitting defeat, and had already begun to go downstairs to the apartment as the lock on the door clicked. Abigail froze, then heard the creak of the door opening. She turned around and saw an elderly woman sullenly looking at her. Abigail cautiously approached the door. "I brought you a treat. You can have them with jam or with maple syrup." And then Mrs. Sanders spoke for the first time in a normal voice. "No, I don't have jam and syrup. I can't afford it. I don't have tea either. I'll eat with water." Abigail gave a silent gasp. She shoved the plate into Mrs. Sanders' hands and then hurried down the stairs. Turning around, she uttered, "I'll get you some tea and jam now. Please wait, don't lock the door." The woman did not answer anything, continuing to look at Abigail. Abigail quickly assembled a bag of treats at home. She put a jar of strawberry jam, a package of tea, a jar of honey, and a packet of cookies in there. She quickly made her way up the stairs. The old lady's door was closed, but when Abigail pulled the handle, the door opened and the woman went inside. She thought she had never experienced such horror as this. The whole apartment was filthy, with bags of what looked like garbage everywhere. The floors had not been washed in years. A pile of rags was lying on the floor, apparently belonging to Mrs. Sanders. On the floor in the corner of the room there was a mattress without a sheet. Instead of a pillow, there was a rolled-up grey rag. There was no blanket at all. In the kitchen, things were not going well. There was one stool in the middle of the room. The refrigerator was open and there was nothing inside. It wasn't even working. There wasn't a cupboard with dishes. One dirty plate lay in the sink. Mrs. Sanders looked at the window. She held a plate in one hand and a bitten pancake in the other. Abigail cautiously approached her. "What happened to you? Why doesn't anyone help you? Don't you have anyone?" Abigail quietly asked the elderly woman. Mrs. Sanders looked the stubborn neighbour straight in the eyes and then said, "If a person has no family, then no one needs him. I have long ago lost the meaning of life. Fate has dealt cruelly with me. I have only to pass from this life unnoticed, leaving behind only dirty rags and garbage." Abigail listened to the elderly woman with horror. How on earth could a person lead such a way of life? Why had she never asked for help? Because there were different organizations that help the weak and lonely people. This was terrible. Abigail took another look at her surroundings. There was not even a table where she could put her groceries, so she put her bag on the dusty windowsill. Abigail felt a thirst for action inside her. No, she did not intend to leave things as they were. She would do everything in her power to help this lonely, poor woman. "Come to my place. I'll make you some tea and feed you." She gently touched the elderly woman's hand. Mrs. Sanders twitched at the touch, but nodded in agreement. Tears appeared in her eyes. Abigail managed to touch the soul of the elderly woman. She hid it behind her scowl and indifference, so people did not pay attention to her, but Abigail's kindness melted the ice in her heart, and she could no longer pretend. Abigail fed and offered tea to Mrs. Sanders, and at the same time planned in her mind for the next steps. She had 3 weeks of vacation ahead of her, and she had no plans, so she decided to help the elderly woman, since no one cared about her. The next day, Abigail knocked on Mrs. Sanders's door again. This time she opened the door immediately. Abigail entered the apartment with a determined look, carrying buckets, rags, and a broom. Exactly 1 week, Abigail cleaned Mrs. Sanders's apartment. She scrubbed all the walls, floors, even got to the ceiling. She threw out all the rags on the floor and carried all the garbage away. A week later, the apartment was unrecognizable. Yes, everything there was old, needed repair, but the apartment was clean and there was no more trash. That was the most important thing. Abigail also posted an appeal on social media for help for the poor, lonely woman. She hoped that some services would respond to help Mrs. Sanders, but she had never expected the flood of sympathy messages that began to come. Many kind-hearted people offered all kinds of help. Many helped financially, and some offered things, clothes, furniture, food, and other help. The owner of a local furniture factory also responded to the call for help. He presented the elderly woman with a good quality bed and mattress and furniture for the kitchen. Mrs. Sanders was so happy that she did not know how to thank all the people who helped her, but she considered Abigail her main saviour. She believed that God himself had sent her this kind woman who was able to see her suffering. There was a knock at the door, and Mrs. Sanders hurriedly opened it. Abigail was standing on the threshold, smiling broadly and handing the elderly woman a box of cake. "Well, let's celebrate your birthday," said Abigail cheerfully to Mrs. Sanders, and the elderly woman smiled happily.